Hello and welcome. We are so excited to welcome you to Living Cities Earth experience. Please enjoy the next few minutes, and we hope that this video and the ideas from our speakers will change your life to the better. Listen carefully. What particularly talks to you? What might have a chance to change your life and lives of people around you? Also, life of your place and our planet. We believe that you, the leaders of positive change, are those who define the future. So let's work together. And thank you for coming. I think we had a very rich, short, but very rich in this time frame opportunity to connect, to see who is doing what and how we could be supportive of each other's projects, and also build something together in many different dimensions. And now I would like to invite whoever is able to stay. We spoke with Said yesterday, and I'm still sort of totally flabbergasted, I guess is the word. So I'm totally blown away by the beauty of what Said is developing. And this is the first presentation from his upcoming book. So Said, if I could, I pass it on directly to you without further
Thank you, Lev. I'm glad to be here. Nice to see some familiar faces, and nice to meet everyone. I decided to do this presentation as a last-minute thing, so forgive me if it's a little bit rough. But in the last 2 days, I try to sort of condense down what I'm writing about in my next book and bring it to the audience. I don't know, Lev, if you can bring up the presentation I sent you, but I can do without it if we need to.
I will open it. If you don't have it on your site, I will open it on my site. It will take me 1 minute.
I come to this work basically from a macroeconomics and spiral dynamics background, and I've worked with the spiral dynamics framework for close to the last 2 decades or so. And about 10 years ago, I put out a book called Memenomics, the Next Generation Economic System. And in it, I applied the evolutionary values that are the stages of development in the spiral dynamics model to the macro systems that are the economic and geopolitics that pretty much run the world. And what I put in that book are basically 2 themes. I was able to capture the history of economic activity, at least in the United States, through the different stages of development that a culture or an ideology goes through. And from that, I was able to project what an evolutionary sustainable economy would look like. And that is on the second slide of the presentation. I don't know if you're able to pull that up,
Yes.
Lev. But it's so it's second slide after that. Yes. So we don't really, it's a lot of information on that, but that's pretty much a summary of my book that pinpoints the different sustainability approaches that we need to take at a holistic, systemic level. That includes how do we redesign a government that is smart enough to capture what needs to be done in order for economics to be sustainable. And, the rest of it really goes into how to make every aspect of what operates an economy more sustainable. So, it gets into the kind of functional financial system, how to adapt the technological and manufacturing advances to make manufacturing process and all the economic output at a sustainable level. But within a few years after I put my book out, something was really nagging at me that says, whatever I put out wasn't going to be enough. And, somewhere at a deep level, I've noticed that even, although the book has been successful, and, there was as recently as a few months ago, a Chinese publisher picked it up for translation and publishing in the mainland. So the ideas that I put in it are attractive to a lot of people. But to me, the platform that I put out 10 years ago is it's not becoming obsolete. It's becoming less of a platform if we really want to go beyond sustainability, because, to me, the issue of quote unquote net zero is no longer an option for us. And if you look at what Mother Nature is telling us, what climate change, what the collapse of different ecosystems are telling us, that these models need to be addressed from a higher fractal, if you will, from a higher level of consciousness. And so what I basically did is I went back to the original work of Claire W. Graves, who is really the ideological father of both spiral dynamics and in part some of the Ken Wilber's work. And Lev, if you can move to the next slide. Yeah. So what I basically created are these different economic life cycles that mimic the pattern of what Graves called the larger meme, the larger fractal of value systems cycle. So for those of you familiar with either spiral dynamics or integral theory, these capture really the economic activity of the entire first tier. So the values of the agricultural, the egocentric, the traditional, the modern, and postmodern, they're all captured in economic expression in this graph here. But what you notice is that these systems reach a nodal peak, and then they begin to decline. And then at the nexus point, what keeps an economic system open is the ability for the next system of higher values to take over from where the system is reaching decline. And you can, based on that, you can tell that our economic activity, so the economic cycle that we're in now, has not yielded to the values of the green system, of the egalitarian and the humanitarian values that seek to bring on, to get rid of inequality and provide more economic opportunity and more of a humanitarian aspect to economics. As you can tell, these systems were reaching peak, going past the nexus stage, and they were at one point in the future reaching a decline point, maybe a common point of entropy that they would reach. So, not being satisfied with my research from 10 years ago, I really went back to discover what Graves's basic research showed. And we can move to the next slide. So what I've discovered basically is, this is one of Graves's original work from the early 1970s, is that there's a very little known aspect of his work called the 6/6 hypothesis, which basically says that every tier of human development contains 6 stages of development. And so what you see on there, stages 1 through 6, and there's a typo on there, stage 1, not sage 1, 1 through 6, basically present the first tier of human existence that we've experienced so far. So this is survival values all the way to postmodern values, which is stage 6. And that with every 6 levels, we go to a new higher level, but the theme of every level as we move up repeats in the second tier. So if you look at survival of the individual as the values of the first tier, when we were caveman, those same values repeat at stage 7, which is the integral stage of existence. This is where Ken Wilber has formulated most of his work, where spiral dynamics really focuses on how to change systems and move them forward. But what Ken and Don ignored is this very basic hypothesis from Graves's work, is that when the theme repeats, it recaptures the earlier corresponding stage, but at a considerably higher level. So while we're comparing stage 1 to stage 7, stage 1 was the survival of the individual. Stage 7 has to deal with the survival of the species, the survival of a planet, the survival of all life as we know it. So that very realization, brought me back to the place where I said, okay, I have to reassess how I'm approaching this. And what came to me is that, those declining life cycles were reaching a point of entropy, and I traced that through Graves's work. And this is what he calls the gap and the chasm that we will have to face before we can jump into the stages 7 or 8. It is basically, I'm calling it in my book, the collective shadow. This is the space where we have to atone to the things that we have done pretty much in our modern history. This is where we have to come, face to face with all the unconscious things that have been a part of our modern existence. We have to basically be able to face the reality that we can no longer externalize the cost of our economic activity, our modern lifestyle. We can no longer externalize that to the environment, and this is the big get that I found in my research is that to capture this, we need to move from values of economic growth that is unimpeded to a place in our consciousness where we adopt the values of degrowth. And so that needs to be the goal as we go through this collective shadow and sort of process everything that we have done wrong in the last 500 years or so. The gold on the other side, if you will, is the idea that we will be much more empowered to understand what it means to approach values that are based on degrowth, that are based on the health of the entire ecosystem instead of just the health of an artificially created economy. Okay, and so next slide, please. So for those of you who are familiar with both the spiral dynamics and the integral model, Wilber created the quadrants. Graves's original work shows a tripad, the elements that determine how we move up in our development is based on 3 different things. It is the neurobiology, the psychology, and the environment. So these 3 things interact together to deliver us to higher values of consciousness. Well, if you take into consideration the gap and the chasm that we must overcome, those things fit in that dark gray space that is the inner concentric circle that is made up of neurobiology, psychology, and sociology. But then after we process that collective shadow that I talked about, we will be able to jump to the second tier. So this is the integrative values of the 7th and the 8th level system, where neurology and psychology, neurology and biology become the biosphere. We have to think of no longer of our individual biology, but of the entire biosphere, and the neurology of the entire planet, the neurosphere. Psychology is transported or transformed into eco-psychology, and sociology of the environment is translated into the eco-sociology that the mind has to become aware of in order for us to address issues of climate change and everything else in an effective way. Now, the diagram that you see to the right there, the one with the right and that shows the brain, this is from Graves's original work, and it shows that the first 6 levels there of human existence, which are 97% of what defines who we are now, have used very small aspects of the brain's capacity. That the mind still has a lot of untapped potential that we must access. And then the bigger circle, the dotted line, shows how the integrative level, how the 7th level system activates a lot more of the brain capacity than we have ever done before. So what I'm doing in my new work is instead of calling it what Don and Ken have called it historically, the first tier and the second tier, I'm really simplifying the language down to language that people understand in common terms. I'm calling the first tier the first sapien, and then the second tier the values of the second sapien. So the first sapien, which is primarily defined by the modern mind, has lived on values of subsistence. Once we go through that shadow and leap transition and come into the second sapient, the values of the seventh level system are those of, and that's a Latinized equivalence of it, Homo ecosystemus, and then the eighth level system is the Homo universalis. It is through these values, and only through these values, that we align the values of the lower systems, and only through doing that we will be able to have a chance at addressing our existential problems. The next slide, please. So this here, you've heard from a lot of the integral people who model the different type of capital that we need to save our planet. This is my view on it. So the first 6 levels there represent the first 6 levels of existence and their corresponding form of capital. It's a rough equivalence. It's not 100% accurate. The agrarian level is the tribal existence, that's agricultural. The next level is the resource that is associated mostly with extractive activities. Then you get manufactured capital, then financial capital on the top of that, and then the human capital. So those are the capitals that are represented in the first tier of existence. We don't, those are already existing. What the second tier does is it really does not create new forms of capital. It just makes the existing levels more efficient and more in tune of what we need to do to have a thrivable planet. So the yellow system there, the sustainable capital system, pretty much aligns everything else to a net zero trajectory. So agrarian capital needs to, have a zero net effect. Resource needs to be cannot add more to the carbon footprint, and so does manufacturing. And then the financial capital needs to really be more geared towards, instead of creating wealth for individuals, it needs to create wealth throughout culture, throughout society, and through regenerating our different ecosystems around the world. This is what the yellow system does. It puts it on a platform towards what a regenerative capital would do. So, Lev and I talked about the idea of is sustainable enough, and there's a discussion I think is going on early tomorrow morning about that. Based on my research, to pursue a net zero policy in as far as economic activity is concerned is no longer a viable goal. We need to be thinking of how we regenerate how we help Mother Nature regenerate much of what we have destroyed in the last 500 years. So that will be the purpose of the 8th level system, the turquoise system in the model. And the last slide there shows bits and pieces of what that transition would look like. So this is the transition, as we overcome that momentous leap, that collective shadow that we have to process. It becomes a transition from where we are now, which is pantometry is a term that was coined by the Enlightenment philosophers. It basically seeks to quantify everything that is quantifiable. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, except the modern mind has used that to manipulate the system, to create scarce resources, to quantify things in order to monetize them and sell them off as proprietary systems. So the movement is from pantometry to gaiometry. Gaiometry is a term basically that I'm using to substitute for degrowth. As many of you know, degrowth is somewhat a stigmatized term, and it really limits the argument to whether you are arguing for economic growth or against economic growth. Well, this puts it in an entirely different realm. It it is about the survival of the planet. It's no longer a debate about whether you could grow economically or not. We have to look to restore what we have used from the planet's resources that have affected the different planetary systems that are in different phases of collapse. So the movement really is from measuring happiness, or what matters to us, from a measure of GDP, a global domestic product, which seems to be the big moving part of the modern mind, to a measure of what I call the index of Earth systems thrivability. Are we contributing to, in our business decisions, in our macro policies, whether they're geopolitical or economic, are we contributing to making the planet thrive, or are we still contributing to extractive activities that affect the health of the planet in the long term? So it's a movement from the values of quantify and externalize, which has been the motto for the last probably 100 years or so. Externalize the cost of economic activity, or whatever the purpose of the quantification was. The byproduct of that was externalized to the environment, to a set of values where we quantify and integrate. So, the science of quantifying is very important as we move forward, but the purpose of it will be used for what the purpose of the second tier system, of the integral level and a turquoise level call for, and that is to revive the planet, to do our fair share to bring back vitality to every aspect of the planetary systems. The shift is from market feasibility to planetary habitability. I mean, you can sense the change in texture of meaning when we're in those values that seek to restore the planet's habitability. From egocentrism to ecocentrism, that's pretty much self-explanatory. From the psychology of the individual or the group to the eco-psychology. Psychology has to be informed by the greater psychology in which all psychologies are nested, which is the eco-psychology. And from sociology, which is the environment, to eco-sociology. Again, that's pretty much self-explanatory. Economic philosophy of grow or die must become a degrowth philosophy to restore and live. Scarcity, which is the one of the fundamental pillars of the capitalist system, is that you have to make something scarce in order for it to create value. So we're moving from scarcity in a world of abundance. We had a world of abundance that is now reaching a point of entropy, to regeneration in a world of scarcity. So there will be scarcity, but because it is called the Anthropocene, it is up to us to begin regeneration of the things that we have lost through our responsible, activities in the first tier, of the first sapient. The Magna Carta had been a source of how to govern in a modern way for the last 700 or 800 years. It is the great charter to the rule of law. We need to move from that to the Gaia Charter. And I heard some talk about the type of open government that is was part of the previous discussion. So it is a movement from that to the greater charter to the rule of nature. So we need to become a part of nature again, not separate from it, but we need to, with all the knowledge that we've accomplished, that we've acquired, we need to reintegrate back into into taking our role in the natural intelligence of things, not the human intelligence all by itself. And then finally there's a whole bunch of these that I discuss in my book. Understand nature in order to tame it. That is what the first Homo sapien has done, is tame nature to understand it. It's purely a mechanical Newtonian approach to help us make sense out of our lives, and that has gotten us where we are now. So that alone is no longer an option to be deployed. So the movement is from that to understand to a place where we understand nature in order to restore it and live in harmony with it. So those are the kind of transition things that we're that the human journey must really undertake in order for us to thrive and live happily on the other side. And and I'm sorry, this is as much as I can come up with in the last 2 days in, in extrapolating what I've been writing about the last 6 months or so, and putting it in as much of a knowledgeable platform as I can. So with that, I thank everybody for listening, and I'm open for questions. If
thank you very much for the really detailed and profound presentation. I'm sure that we all enjoyed, everybody who is watching here through YouTube and in recording. And if I may, I would ask first question and then open the floor. I'm sure other people might also want to ask you about some specifics for the overall framework. Where I would like to start, I envy you because I want to write a book, but I don't have time. So my first question is, being in this process, as you said, for the last 6 months, how do you see yourself evolve as a human being? We talk about happy cities, living planet, and all those things. I know a little bit your sort of personal trajectory, but in those specific 6 months, thinking about the planetary issues and our challenges and everything, how do you see yourself evolving as a human being on this journey?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question, Lev. It was, I don't know if I want to call it, it's because I live in an open system, but I try my best to keep my mind open to what's next, to what helps people evolve, what helps systems evolve. And maybe trying to focus and remaining in that state is a difficult thing sometimes. Life throws different challenges, our way, and I've had to deal with some personal issues. As some of you might know, my wife Elza, who's worked with me and Don Beck on some an initiative, a peace initiative in the Middle East. About 5-6 years ago, she was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia. So to me, her illness sort of brought into perspective of really myself asking what the purpose of life is, and if something could disappear so quickly and unexpectedly. All we have on this planet is a very short period of time where we can influence things the way we'd like to maybe see change happen. And I've just been a very lucky person in the sense of being able to work with Don Beck and get exposed to all these evolutionary concepts. Marilyn's work with integral cities, Wilbur's work, all that contributed to me being in an open state. That it was just a matter of a decision, Lev, that I 6 months ago, I decided that, enough procrastination. I've done enough research. I have grieved the loss of my soulmate and my life partner. It was actually right after Don Beck passed away in May that I said to myself, well, this is it. I'm the only standing person. If I'm not going to do it now, it's never going to happen. And so, and that's when I started writing. And it's brought me to really get familiarized with what I've written before and the evolutionary process that I've been through, paralleled with all the changes that have taken place since I left this work, and I'm back to it, looking at it from a deeper and more profound angle.
Thank you for being on this journey. It really provides all of us with lots of wealth and deeper understanding of all those processes. I pass it on to whoever wants to pick it up with questions or comments. The floor is open.
Saeed, it's beautiful to be in the same room with you. It's been a while.
And, well, likewise, Marilyn. It's nice to see you.
Beautiful work. I really love what you've done, and as I said in the chat, I love gaiametry.
Yes. Yeah, actually, the term was hijacked by some new age people to express the different kind of gems that you can buy, but I'm sure it's not copyrighted.
Well,
it's still, yeah. So thank you for saying that. Wonderful.
When you first published Memenomics, it was like a radical new reframing of economics. And since then, we've had a number of other authors come along and frame things from regenerative economics. And one of the most popular is donut economics.
Right.
Are you seeing those as aspects of the proposal that you're making to frame the evolutionary unfolding? I have to say, I must always, excuse me for interrupting you, I just wanted to say I am always very appreciative of your comments in that area, because I often also find myself alone saying, oh yes, there's another dimension. It's called development, it's called evolution, it's called that trajectory, and we can't just group people together on flat land.
Yes,
that's what I see you're doing in a beautiful way with the economics at a new, I think, a new depth. So I'd love to have your comments about, so when you saw donut economics come up, what happened with your thinking about your own work?
Yeah. So it's amazing, this synchronicity in this, Marilyn, because this is the chapter that I'm working on now. I'm comparing, one of the last slides that I shared about what the yellow and the turquoise system need to do. And I'm comparing different models out there. Primarily, the two different sustainability models that are out there are the circular economy and the donut economy. Right. And to me, the donut economy really articulates what a turquoise system would do. You cannot go outside the bounds of these systems, and it really defines them. And these are planetary systems that, of which we cannot exceed the use of certain resources and so forth. And similarly with the circular economy, the problem that I'm running into is that why haven't they been adopted by leaders? And why haven't we seen them, reach a point where they begin to define bigger and bigger parts of what we're doing? And what came to me is that these ideas are swimming in an ecosystem of first-tier values. Mm-hmm. That when you share wonderful ideas like that with a leader, they absorb it through whatever their center of gravity is. So if their thinking is, I'm a politician who needs to provide employment for my people and to save my own political career, while you're asking me to do is going to reverse, a good portion of what I know to be economic activity, I'm not going to adopt them. So therein lies the problem, is that, all these great ideas get to be adopted by the values of the modern mind, by the values that for the last 500 years, all they've known is extractive economic activity. The idea of degrowth is death to the brightest leaders out there. Look at what's happening in France. Everybody thought Macron was the next great leader. And the minute he says, in order for us to save the retirement pension, we have to, and all hell breaks loose in France. These are the kind of, and that's just one tiny fragment of what, a second tier thinker would do. So imagine bringing that to a worldwide economy. It's not, the reason I say there's a collective shadow that we have to deal with, this is exactly it. This is the idea that we have to process everything that we have done in the last 500 years and reflect on where it has gotten us in a very conscious way in order for us to begin to see that degrowth is a thing of the future. In order for, I explain a donut economy or circular economy to a conscious leader, and they say, yes, now I'm beginning to see, because my own values have changed, we need to pursue degrowth the best way we can. And it just flies in the face of everything we have known to be good and true the last 100 years.
And I think, Saeed, I had the reciprocal effect, because I tried explaining the spiral evolution to donut economists. So I actually took the donut through its stages as it becomes less and less viable, and ran it through spiral dynamics to say, this is why we, stretched out beyond our constraints. So
Right.
it's very nice to see your much more elegant framing. So thank you. Very much.
Thank you. Well, in that chapter about the collective shadow, I mean, a lot of this, there's going to be a lot of pain. We're gonna really have to learn to reverse much of what Western philosophy has stood for, in the sense that we can only define life through our own mind, and we can change things. We need to get to a space where we accept that even our own death is a part of life. The death of the ego is a part of the rebirth of the greater ego. And so it becomes more like philosophical and psychological than it does just economic. So it really deals with the other aspects of what it is to be human than it is just how do we provide society an economic model that's survivable. We have to address all the issues that we basically have ignored the last few hundred years.
Thank you.
Alexander, please.
Thank you, Lev. Saeed, thank you so much. And really, put my hand down. My question comes right in line with what Marilyn was just saying. And if you permit me just to set it up for a moment.
Sure, please.
Because I feel like I can consult with you. I mean, I feel like maybe, not that you will have the answer, but hopefully you will have some guidance along these lines from what you have shared, because I feel it's just very powerful. Firstly, I'm fascinated by your own personal journey and life story in this. Fascinated is not quite the right word, because it's much more along the empathetic lines. But it does somehow bring to mind this whole notion of fractal ontology, where what you're experiencing is echoed in what you're seeing in the world in its own dimensions of emergence. And I'm wondering how that plays in, because it obviously provides you with a lens, your own experience, and how that, I mean, you're even saying the same things just now. So the question has to do with the frameworks that Carolyn Merchant, the political philosopher and ecofeminist working at the UC Berkeley, uses. She has a three-tier value meme framework for human civilization. She talks about the egocentric frame, which is that which in the capitalist materialist world is what operates, right? And it's a coherent ethic that says I need to look out for number one. And if everybody did like I did, nobody would be a burden on anybody else. So it's that kind of logic. Then she calls it homocentric. I'm not sure why she doesn't call it anthropocentric, but homocentric ethic, which is taking care of the planet for future generations, but of human beings, so that our great-grandchildren can see living orangutans, not because the orangutans have rights, but because our great-grandchildren should deserve to see that. So it's homocentric. Then there is the ecocentric frame, which is then I'm not trying to save the rainforest as a human being, but I'm part of the rainforest trying to save itself. Change of identity. And then I've added a fourth level rather, which is the evolutionary centric, evocentric, which suggests that things must also die. And there must be also times in which things go into extinction to allow for other things to arise. And that is something to be celebrated as well. Whereas at the ecocentric level, all life is sacred, all life must be preserved. And that doesn't allow for transition, emergence. So to get to my question, I'm going to put into the chat, I hope you can see here, a little framework that I've come up, and I'm wondering if this makes sense to you, because something I might want to ask for Daniel Christian Wall as well when he comes on a little later. And the idea is, I see that there's a period in which we really had an extractive framework, and as you said, it's frankly much before 1760s, but there was an extractive engagement with the world. Then sustainability came kind of burst onto the scene in the late 80s, let's say, with the Brundtland Report and so on. Then we've come into the second decade of this millennium, and we looked at a regenerative framework, which is about rethinking, restoring, replenishing. And I've always been struck by how we're not talking about generative frameworks. We're talking about regenerative frameworks. And regeneration is a synonym of healing. It's so important. Sustainability is so important. I'm not trying to say they're not important, but for me, it is necessary but not sufficient. We must have generative frameworks, which is the last one that I put there about evolve, where things also admit the need for certain patterns to decay and others to come into play. So it's not just the regeneration of what is, but is the creation of the conditions for the emergence of something we can't even conceive of now.
Yes, 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 yes.
What is your holding of that?
Well, I want to put what you just said in a bigger framework that that really got me into starting research into that is now being a part of my book, and that is in our modern mind efforts to make the world a better place, to see it all connected through commerce and development and all that. We have extracted, the cost of that to the environment, to the point where we've triggered the collapse of the greater fractal, of the greater holon that we're in. And we really don't have too much knowledge. I mean, that's turquoise science. This is science of the 8th level. And what happened is, the way the Gravezian model works is that, whenever we begin to sense the problems of existence in certain area, that triggers the intelligence in our own adaptive mind to begin to address it. So what we've done with climate change is that we triggered the problems of the 8th level of existence, when in reality, the center of gravity is somewhere between the 5th level, that is the orange, the strategic thinker, the modern mind, and the 6th level, which is the egalitarian and the humanitarian mind. If the center of gravity is there, you're looking not only at the momentous leap that needs to take place, but also at 2 levels higher. So my thinking is that we have very little knowledge at what stage. I presented the life cycle model, and the reason I presented that is because when I look to place climate change on the life cycle, nothing got past that introductory phase. It seems like, one day you hear issues of the melting ice cap. They're moving, twice as fast as we thought. And then suddenly, 2 months later, a report comes out and says, oh, no, we were wrong. It's moving 4 times as fast. The carbon parts per million are on this trajectory, and then suddenly new data comes out. Oh, no, we've exceeded. So right away you can gauge that the turquoise science needs to be, empowered a lot more, and that we really have no clue of what stage in the collapse on that. I believe a lot of the Earth system have gone past the nexus point on that life cycle, but we simply don't know it. And so the best we can do is do our best to prevent collapse. But Mother Nature is going to do what Mother Nature is going to need to do for her to reach balance. I mean, let's get our ego out of the way here. We could be looking in another 20 years, and Graves, God, predicted this 50 years ago. He basically told Don Beck that we probably won't be able to go to the integral level of existence without half of the population dying off. And his projections weren't based on, he was very intuitive about that stuff. And to look at what we're heading into, the idea that, half of the Midwest here will be underwater in another 20 years, the dry is going to get drier, the cold is going to get colder, the hot's going to get hotter, and so forth. I mean, that's just an operation of Mother Nature that we could barely begin to understand in order for us to do something about. And the best thing we can do is adapt. It's getting to know ourselves better so we can cope with whatever Mother Nature is going to give us in a more conscious way. It's not that we can contribute to restoring. Once that life cycle of Mother Nature, the different aspects of it reach the point of the nexus point, like Leah Pergogine says, the possibilities are endless. You could never predict which direction it's going to happen. And I believe, on half of those Earth systems, we're beyond that nexus point. And so the best we can do is try to manage it the best way we can, whether it's sustainability, I think, is out of the question. I mean, those values won't save the planet. Regenerative values, generative values will probably make us become more acceptable of our destiny. I picked up a couple of books by an author by the name Roy Scranton. I don't know if you've run across his work. He's he's not a part of any, evolutionary community or spiral dynamics of Ringel, but he talks about, a foregone conclusion that we're screwed. I mean, that's the title of one of his books, Climate Change. We're screwed. Now what? And he goes into details on how we have defined our modern values through the lens of Western civilization. When in reality, to help us cope with what's coming, we need to return to Eastern tradition. We need to understand what karma and the role of life is in order to put, the long life and, and the purpose of karma and the soul and what our purpose, in reincarnating and coming back is, all that, it's just, you might not, people might not believe in it, but it just gives you that perspective that allows you to think that, yeah, hell, well, we caused this, and I feel, somewhat responsible or more adjusted to what's going to come, instead of saying, well, yeah, I'll just, create some mitigation measures that could be rendered absolutely useless in another 5 years.
Saeed, and I know that we have Feriel and Lev right here waiting, and so I want to just to put a fine point on it to see if I can get a specific response. In your model, and by the way, the idea of seeing this in the perspectives of the Eastern also was coming out in the quantum physics, is affirming those kind of non-linear. Prigogine had said this many years ago, but there's a non-linear trajectory here. It's not looking at this as saying, how are we just going to go from this model, from this way of being to the next one in an extrapolation? No, this is clearly, and this is where I think Marilyn's optimism comes in as well. This is where we have bifurcation points that we can not see what the outcomes of are, bad sentence, but we can at least create the conditions for emergence in a certain direction. Right. Question is, your model seems to end with regeneration, the top level. And I'm wondering, why not generation, like generative power and evolution, or again, those aspects which create the conditions for surprise, for emergence, which the kind of emergence which is healthy, not just healing what is, which is regeneration, but actually creating conditions for that which isn't yet.
Yeah. I to be honest, I have to think about that. Regeneration is putting back that which we have taken out of Mother Nature, restoring it back the best way we can, but not only for it to just be restored, but in order for it to also regenerate and create new ecosystems and new habitats for survivability. Generation is, both concepts are still limited to what that bigger fractal that is, Mother Nature's ecosystem decide to do. We're at the mercy of that. And so, yes, it could be regenerative, it could be generative, it could be sustainable, but in the end, we're bumping up against the holonic structure in which all this is nested, and that we are at the mercy of that. And however we interpret what we need to do, it remains subjective. I mean, it's till we know further about what's causing collapse and how to address it effectively, we're just going to be in that space of trust that we're doing the right thing and hope for the best.
Feriel, do you still want to go ahead?
For me, it was depending on the time. So if there's too little time, I'll let you go.
We have eternity.
But clearly, what Saeed just said.
But at least 30 minutes.
I feel so privileged, Lev.
So is it okay, Liv?
Yes. Go ahead.
So it was, I really enjoyed listening to this, because it really, I think it, Saeed, thank you for those reflections, really, and giving it some solidity as well. I think in a lot of my work, one of the things I do, so I'm trying to bring what you're talking in these very big terms down to like the average human being to understand, right? And so I use the analogy of the happily ever after, that there is no happily ever after. Let go of that idea. So, and when I say happily ever after, it's just the idea that everything's going to be right. But at the same time, there's the paradox of everything will be all right. Right. And what I mean by this is, so I use words, for that generative that Alexander spoke about as mystery. And that falling into that mystery and trusting that mystery, because we kind of have been on a cosmological journey, whether it was from our little cell to now, so, and that thing is, it's flowed and it's done what evolution has followed its path.
Right.
And holding the balance and doing all of that. So I think I have a question in here somewhere. And my question is, when I look at your, the little drawing that you had, the graphic with the little kind of the gray area, and that is the transformative, how we need to move from this thinking, the paradigm shift that we have to have, that work we've got to do. Now, I mean, I saw that little valley being from, I think it was 6 to 7 level thinker, or 7 to 8 level thinker. And that wasn't even touching the 1st to 2nd level thinker. So this is where, for me, it starts getting to, oh my gosh. Why I say that is because of the work that I have to do. For me, it's about them having that paradigm shift. Yeah. In other words, we're in this playground with all these different levels. So let's call it a schoolroom with like all these different levels of thinkers. So my question becomes, your advice on how do we hold that space for all that kind of paradigm shift having to happen on all these different levels? Because that is really the complexity I ran into in designing that kind of journey for individuals. And so I kind of had to pick a group, and really I would want to hold space for that transition of all of us. And what is your advice about that?
Yeah, well, that gray area that you spoke about, I'm calling the collective shadow, and I struggled, quite a bit to try to define that. And in the end, it really is definable by what you would consider doing shadow work yourself. And, so bring out to the light the things that have been, that have remained unconscious, the things that, you have sidelined as important, as unimportant as an individual. And as you begin to process these things, think of how we as humans have affected, the different ecosystems around us, the different groupings, the different formations, how our policies, the Western world have affected, whether it's colonialism or post-colonialism, how it affected the growth of other humanity. All that is a part of the shadow that needs to be processed. To bring it down to the individual level, I think it's a space where an individual has to be okay with the idea that what's coming might not look like anything we have known. That is, the future, might not involve, employment the way we've known it, or calculation of economic metrics the way we've known them, or the idea that, keep in mind that the 7th level of development is a lot like the survivalistic values of the caveman. So imagine the elemental naturalistic existence of the caveman, with the added benefit of the cognitive intelligence that we have acquired, the technological advantages that we acquired, and put that in a new perspective to create what that system would look like. So it's like a return. If we can skip the industrial age, if you can bypass that and look at what life would have been like, that will paint a very good example of where we will be, on the other side of, on the other side of processing that shadow at that 7th level. And it just so happens that it's you have to integrate the complexity, the healthiest part of the complexity we experienced since that 1st level system, which translates into, how do you do it with integral cities? How do you do it with thrivable cities? How do you do it with, we cannot, go back to living off the land. So how do you do it with the structures that are already existing and make it sustainable and regenerative? So those are the questions that really, that's the $64,000 question that still needs to be answered. And that's what, I think that's what the purpose of this group is to put our minds together and try to come up with these answers.
Well, thank you for that wisdom. And in the end, if I look at how life, kind of looks, there's life and there's death. So maybe all we're really doing is kind of just delaying the inevitable. Perhaps there is a path that we have to just evolve to something else.
Yes. And you need to have leaders at the community level, at every leadership structure, at every leadership hold-on, begin to believe that transition to something that is extraordinary is happening whether we like it or not. We are no longer in charge of what the next system is going to look like. Mother Nature is going to dictate that, and it's up to us and our leaders to adjust to that and lessen the effects of that collective shadow.
If I may pick up from here, first of all, Marilyn, I see that it's time to go. It's quite late also in Europe, even in the United Kingdom. So Marilyn, thank you for your service to Gaia and humanity throughout the whole day today. And I know that we have a long day tomorrow as well. So please rest well. That's a message to Marilyn from all of us.
Thank you, everyone. Blessings.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank
nice
you.
to see you.
Thanks, Alexander and Lev, for being such great leaders. Thank you, Saeed. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Marilyn. Take care.
Ferial will conquer Scotland.
Beautiful. So, Saeed, I really want to mention how liberating and uplifting is, to me, is what you have shared today. And I have experienced a similar, but quite in a different context, feeling. If you know a gentleman, his name is Martin Knox. He lives in the United Kingdom. Marilyn introduced me to him a few months ago. He's also a co-founder of Living Cities Earth. So Martin started to work with us. It's a different context, but it will come together in a couple of minutes. So he started working with Living Cities Earth and developing sort of our identity, what we're about in a very short terms, like a branding sort of exercise. And at some point, he was like, we don't need a logo. I was like, how is it that we don't need a logo? Everybody needs a logo to be recognized. He says, no, that's not what I mean. It's not that we don't need a logo at all, but we don't need to establish or to select one logo like everybody does. We're a living system, we're changing, we have different contexts. We could have as many logos as we want. To me, initially, it was a very sort of strange idea. Not in a bad way, but just very unfamiliar. How can we have several logos, etc.? But about a few weeks later, something clicked in my mind, and I realized it's so liberating. We don't have to go by the structure which was established and was very solid in the current system of thinking.
No.
And we started using one logo in this context and another logo. Somebody likes this blue, for example, globe you see on one of the avatars. Another person likes something else. And we found that it gives a lot of free energy flow. So that was a very liberating experience to go beyond traditional thinking, sort of, right? And when I listened in our conversation yesterday and today in your presentation, beautiful, those ideas about that we most likely we're going through a very transformational process as a civilization and large sort of ecosystem. And when you look at it from the deeper perspective, right, transformation of consciousness, evolution of life itself, not from my personal perspective or even our group perspective, then there is no problem. Really. And you often hear those what's called alarmist talk, that everything is falling down, everything, everybody will die. And it's not the problem with the collapse. Of course, it's not good to when things collapse. I'm not suggesting that we should celebrate it, but it's when you look from a deeper perspective, and also as Alexander, I believe, and you also mentioned, and you understand those cycles of life, which old traditional societies like with Krishna and I forgot the name of those Indian goddess. One is the god of creation, one is a god of destruction, right?
Shiva, yes.
Shiva, right, thank you. So, and listening to you, it also gave me a great sense of freedom and richness of life experience right now. So I don't need to hold on to some specific trajectory of my personal or even our collective life, but I could be free to experience the unfolding of reality while being connected to my deeper and sort of evolutionary, more and more deeper or higher levels of consciousness, be a force of good to my daughters or my wife or the whole community or the whole planet, but still be free from the attachment to what is, right? And rather be open to the beautiful magic process of evolution. So sorry for my ramblings, but I just
it's absolutely beautiful, Lev. I'm so glad that you shared that. Yeah, that's absolutely essential. Is detachment. What are we really detaching from? This whole artificial construct of we need to have a job in order for us to to have a better home and better clothes and drive a better car and all that. It's all attachment begets attachment, and that's just the way the enlightened mind works. And it's we don't need to necessarily bypass it. We need to take its best practices and learn how to detach from it, even if it disappears, that we should be okay. And I think that's really where the shadow work begins, is that how do we bypass the age of enlightenment, the idea that quantification of everything was good? How do we detach from quantification being used to create attachment and consumption and begin to affect the Earth system, cause them to collapse? How do we move from that and use quantification to provide everyone on the planet a better life? And that could only be done by the restorative efforts that we're going to do through our behavior in restoring the different ecosystems to the Earth, the way we relate to each other, the way we relate to all other living systems on Earth. So what you're bringing up is quite important. It's attachment from the ego at its highest form to the to the open state of being open as being just one life form on a planet with limited resources.
Can I mention, while Lev is struggling with his microphone, that this is beautiful because it brings into play many people talking about interbeing, right? And the need for recognizing this comes from Thich Nhat Hanh's work. Charles Eisenstein has brought it forward. And I've found Akomolafe, Bayo Akomolafe, has written also about intra-being. And that's what I'm hearing you talk about right now, Said, that we are actually just one being on this planet,
right.
And we are all, with our own volition,
right.
part of that self-similar being. And how can we then recognize not just our interdependence, but our intradependence, because we are actually all in this co-creative sphere. We can't really run away from the planet or from each other, right. Which is us. So I think that's a different holding. I have to go say goodbye to somebody real quick. I'll be right back. Sorry.
But what an incredibly beautiful reflection, right? When you see, I think it was Marilyn that was talking about our brain being this hologram, kind of showing us certain things. And really, nature has really showed us this all along. There is no fear here. I mean, we fear death, but there's no need, because we're energy. We become part of the next cycle of whatever life is. So when we also don't see ourselves just as a being from Earth, but actually a being that is part of an entire cosmos, which it's going to have this cycle, and it's going to have the life and the death embedded in there, and really just embracing that and actually enjoying our part of the story, you know, to the greatest degree that we can.
Yeah. The idea that, there's a comparison between human cognitive intelligence and natural intelligence. You put the two side by side, and you begin to see the kind of work that we need to do. Mother Nature is indifferent about whether we live or die. She's just reaching balance after, all the damage that we've done. She's reaching balance, to remain in that space of Holocene, the ideal place for humanity to exist. And even when that stops without human intervention, Mother Nature will move on. We might die off as a species. It happens automatically without an ego awareness that, the Homo sapien is a preferred species, I'm going to guard them. No, it's just, you have to take into consideration the natural intelligence and how it operates for no other reason other than to help us detach from our ego. We seem to continue on the path of, separating ourselves from nature in order for us to make sense of, how we develop medicines, how to develop better ways of living. Well, that's great. That needs to, we've taken that to the point of no return. And now we need to come back and say, okay, what are we creating? How would us continuing on the same path that we've created affect the natural intelligence of the bigger whole on that we live in? And that's really the next frontier to me.
It's interesting, if I haven't interrupted anyone, with Alexander yesterday, we were speaking about creating a sort of a workshop and eventually a course for leaders worldwide on developing the evolutionary leadership worldview, skills, competences, etc. And just looking at who is at the screen right now, I was thinking Chantal Garneau, she's our colleague from Canada. She could share her experience with, let's say, running municipal systems, right? Alexander could really share a lot about systemic leadership and evolutionary leadership. Alexei Gershenko, who is also here, he is a great sort of leadership coach and does a lot of things with developing inner capacity of those leaders. Ferial, with her double Scotland and South African background, could really talk about inspiring leadership and many other sort of skills. And Said, you could bring this framework of first and second sapient, because imagine if we just, it's such a strong idea that we looking the same on the outside could belong either to first sapient, first level of development, right, of sort of Homo sapiens, or it could belong to the second one. And it's really, in a way, a matter of it not only, but also inner choice, sort of conscious choice. Where do you want to, as you said, where is your center of gravity, your center of attention? Is it in survival mode? Then you can spend your whole life surviving. There is no limit to it. You'll always try to survive. Or it's in the evolutionary mode. And I think if we move more and more people towards recognizing this choice and the whole sort of, perspective, and really voting for the internal sort of personal life to go more on the second, quote unquote, level, thinking and action and interaction and evolution, that could be an interesting change on an increasing scale. So I invite you to consider to do such a program, and under Alexander's guidance, I think we can create a beautiful program.
I think this platform, Lev, and everything that represents the living city is the ideal platform that can capture the attention of leaders, especially the more time goes by and the more what I call existential issues that we face, be it climate change, be it the obsolescence of our economic models, be it the idea that we keep doing the same the same thing over and over again, not achieving better results. All of that activity that's happening is going to force leaders to start looking for different answers. 2 decades ago, they weren't. I mean, the awareness that, things are changing and not for the better wasn't there. We were sort of sticking our heads in the sand and saying, yeah, well, that's a fringe thing that we have to do something about, climate change or that we're depleting our resources or whatever it might be. But now it's becoming more and more a part of the mainstream consciousness. And that what we're doing here can definitely affect systems thinker that can affect change at a global level. Thank you all. This was wonderful. This was a great. I'm so glad I had more time to engage. I felt like my presentation was just one monologue, and I'm so glad to hear that most of you found something good in it. So I'm so happy to have been a part of this presentation, and I will continue engaging in the next 2 days.
Said, remind me, do you live in San Diego?
San Diego, yes.
Alexei is also.
We're neighbors.
Oh, we are.
Yes.
Yes. Well, we should.
Would love to meet you one day personally. Thank you so much for your presentation. Me and my colleagues were also using Spiral Dynamics as one of the framework and map which helps leaders to increase their consciousness with where they are and how they can find the opportunities, right, to become better.
That's
people,
fantastic.
leaders. Yes,
Fantastic.
so I would love to connect with you more. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Great. Okay.
Thank you, Said, for the gift of who you are.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you all. Thanks, Lev, for putting this together.
Wow, you have made it. You just watched amazing insights from experts of Living Cities Earth ecosystem. We welcome you to the Living Cities Earth experience and hope that we are going for a long ride as we take care of ourselves, our communities, our cities, and our planet. Thank you and welcome.